Hello there. Before we get started today, I have something I want to share with you that I read yesterday, believe it or not, on Insta. Um, and it said the reason hugs are so valuable is that on the right side of your chest, you have nothing. On the left side of your chest, you have a heart. And when two people come together in a hug, both of them have hearts on both sides. Isn't that super sweet? Anyway, I am Karen. I am here with you today to talk about getting square. So it's not as much of a flow today. It will be working through a few postures and demonstrating the difference between squaring up your hips and unsquaring, like an unsquare dance. Does that exist? In the jazz world, it does. Anyway, just to kind of as a quick start, I'm going to come off my pillow here and move backwards so you can see me. A lot of people, when they're doing janu sursasana, go ahead and shift the extended leg forward, which means your hips are unsquare, which means you're torquing your low back and your hip. In this case, it's my left hip as you're folding. The goal is to square up the hips to get the most out of it and to not torque the hips. So today we'll look at Warrior One, Parsvottanasana, chair twist, and I think there was something else, but we'll figure out whatever that was. But we're going to start in a comfortable seated position, meditative if you like, with hands in the lap, stacked, and the pads of the thumbs touching, or you can rest your hands on your knees or thighs. But you really want a nice long spine. You want to open up the chest and the collarbones, making space for a hug. We'll take a big deep breath in. Let it go through the mouth. This time, shrug the shoulders up when you breathe in. Draw them behind you. Hands will come away from the body and release. Two more of those. And forward. Let the arms hang. Move the head about. Left and right, forward and back, maybe in circles. You need to take it slower, take it slower. You might hear a little or a lot of crackles and cracks. Things moving around, reconnecting, stretching, maybe getting air out of some of the sockets. And then we'll find our stillness, maybe with the eyes gently closed or looking downward. Again, a meditative posture. Tailbone draws forward a little bit and the belly draws in and up. Here you'll notice the breath. Not necessarily efforting it. Feel how it changes the shape of the body. And feel if your hips are even with one another. And maybe you test that by switching the cross of your legs. Today's practice, and in fact, every practice, is really about experiencing the postures. What does the body feel like? Where are you stretching? Where are you holding on? Where are you strengthening? The focus is the squaring up of the hips so that we're not doing things sort of unnatural for our low back and our hips. So drop your hands by your sides. Inhale, sweep them high overhead. Press the palms together there and see if you can get a little taller. Sitting bones attached to the earth. Middle fingers reaching for the sky. And then we'll take a tilt over to the right. Rise back up, tilt to the left. Rise back up. Bend the elbows, the fingertips come to the nape of the neck or between your shoulder blades. Loosen the knees and calves and press the head back into the forearms. Interlace your fingers, press your hands flat to the back of the head. Maybe the thumbs come beside the neck or to the sides of the neck, and maybe there's a little bit of love that you give yourself there with a little massage. Here at Salt and Sand Studios, we love to feel the heart opening. So we're going to take tilt again over to the left. Back up. Did you know that there's a posture in cricket, a response in cricket that's called the teapot? And we're going to tilt to the other side. It sort of is a representation of disgust. Come back up. This time we're going to twist. Keep those sitting bones to the earth. We're twisting to the right and scoop that left elbow or dip the left elbow toward the right knee. You don't have to touch. Come back up, straighten everything out. Twist over to the left. Keep your hips squared up and dip the right elbow. Rise back up, nice long spine. Twist to the right. Dip left elbow toward right knee. And rise. Last time, we turn to the left, dip the right elbow to the left knee, and rise back up. Draw the hands behind you, hook your fingers or interlace them, and if you normally hook them or interlace them one way, then do it the opposite way. Draw the knuckles toward the earth, lift the heart, lift the belly, squeeze the shoulder blades together. Oh, it feels so nice on the collarbones. Opening up the heart like you're making space for a hug. Sorry, you might hear that several times today. Now we're going to scoop the belly in, fold over the legs, keep your bind, and maybe your hands lift away from the ground or your back. Nod your head and shake your head. As you rise up, arms float high. Exhale, hands at your heart. And just for a moment, consider here, either or both, your motivation for coming to your mat, whether you're live here with me on Saturday morning or you're watching the recording. And then consider your intention for this practice. Be there, be square. So the first test we're going to work with is child's pose. Yay! We love child's pose. And if it helps, you can always grab a prop, like a bolster or a blanket or a pillow or cushion. Big toes touch, knees are apart. Draw your bolster or folded blanket or cushion between the knees and drop forward. Maybe your chin rests on the pillow, maybe your head does. Arms are straight in front, and here you should feel the hips sort of even or squared up rather than one hip in front and one hip sort of behind, or one hip higher and one hip lower. And sometimes we can't notice it. That's okay. Sometimes our body, based on things like scoliosis or Parkinson's or arthritis or fused vertebrae, sometimes that means your hips don't square up. So please be aware of not overdoing it. We're going to rise up, remove any prop. Bring your knees right underneath your hips and sit back on your heels. If you have trouble bending your knees that much, you can place something behind your thighs or on top of your calves. And just start to feel, take a look down. Again, sometimes things are different because maybe one thigh or one femur is longer than the other. And I can see that my right knee is just slightly in front of my left, so I'm going to draw it back a little bit. And now my hips should be squared up. I'm going to move my way into a tabletop. Spread my feet as wide as my knees and have my wrists right under my shoulders. Now, if you are practicing with me and you are watching me, just note that I don't have full flexibility in my left wrist. So the heel of the hand does not come all the way down to the ground. Now your hips are squared up. You make a little movement of the belly button toward the spine. If that doesn't resonate with you, tuck your tailbone forward a little bit and make a little space between your shoulder blades. This in and of itself is a strengthener. But you want to be all squared up, especially when you release the right leg off the mat behind you, because what tends to happen is people open up their hips. It's a little harder for you to see, so I'm going to do it on the other side. So lots of people will turn their hips, and then they have to stretch their arm to get to the ground. You want to square them up. So open hips, squared up hips. Open hips, squared up hips. Now there are postures intended to open the hips, but a regular tabletop does not call for that. Now we're going to find our balance. If you square your hips up and you draw your belly in and you press the foot that's on the ground right into the earth and float the opposite arm to the extended leg out in front, this is a huge challenge. Nice strengthener, especially for the belly. You're utilizing the quads of the extended leg and the bent leg. And we draw the hand down. We're going to take a little quad butt stretch. I forgot the word glutes. All right. The raised leg comes over the calf of the opposite leg. We draw that leg out and back so the front of the hip of the extended leg is near the heel of the other leg. And you might bring yourself to your forearms. Here, and the hips are not squared up necessarily. This is not the same as a pigeon. It's a glute opener, but without a lot of stress on the hips. We come back to the three-legged tabletop to square up the hips again. And then as we draw that extended leg toward the elbow on the same side, we want to work to keep the hips squared up. Extend and bring your knee to the mat. It's really nice to take some hip circles here. Check where your knees are. They should be parallel, which would be indicative of your hips being squared up. Again, unless you have a physical difference that will cause that. All right, other side. Square everything up. Tailbone tucked so your belly button moves in and up toward the spine. Little space between your shoulder blades, and gently lift the opposite leg long. So my right leg is extended. My right hip loves to come up. So I'm really going to work to press the top of the left foot into the mat. Reach with my right heel and draw the belly in and activate the glutes. Now with my hips squared up, I reach my left arm in front. Doesn't matter if your leg is lifted so it's completely parallel to the earth. Sometimes that's not the case. You might hear pops and cracks in your spine. If that feels okay, then it's okay. Left hand down, right leg sweeps across the calf of the left leg. Drop the shoelace side of the foot to the earth, and then glide the front of your hip to your heel. I have the pole as a little prop here. Rise back up, square up the hips, reach the right heel, and then bring the knee back down to the mat. Again, maybe hula hoop circles or cats and cows, the letter C or a half moon left and right. If you do something asymmetrical, match it on the other side, even though the body is not fully symmetrical. All right. You're going to walk the hands forward a couple of inches. Tuck the toes under. Make sure your knees are even, parallel. And then very slowly with wide fingers on an exhale, lift your hips using your belly into your downward facing dog. Your feet should be parallel, not too wide, not too thin, not too close together. Rise up to the tiptoes, bend your knees a lot, press your chest toward your thighs, look past your hands, and then hop, skip, jump, crawl, walk forward to your wrists, forward fold. Once again, check that your feet are aligned. Some of us, like me, have one foot that is quite a bit longer than the other. So you just might check on that. I know that my right foot is much shorter, so I try and align my heels to align my hips rather than my toes. Now for a halfway lift, you can draw your hands to your shins or your thighs, or keep the fingertips on the ground, or use a prop. And here we keep the hips squared up. Rise halfway up, draw the belly in, the shoulders back. Breathe in. Breathe out and fold. 2 more, half lift. Ardha Uttanasana. Exhale, forward fold. And again. This time we'll rise up to stand. Working to stack the knees over the heels, the hips over the knees, and the head on top of the neck with the shoulders over the hips. Now for some, you might be shifting forward with the hips or backward with the hips, and you really want them stacked right over your knees. And you also notice, do the hips feel squared up? And when we check, we really check the front bones, the bony part of the hip, to see if they are equal or even. So bring your hands to your hips. Check that out. Change if you need to. And we're going to spread the arms out and move into a twist. And rather than twist from here, we're twisting from here. So the twist might not be as deep as you often take while you're trying to keep the hips square. So breathe in and twist to the right. Arms twist, belly twists. But if your hip twists, you might look down and see that one leg is now more in front of the other, or one hip is behind the other. So we'll work to square them up. Come forward, arms up overhead, twist to the other side. Again, I'm not twisting very far because my hips will join in and I don't want them to. So because I don't want to torque them, rise back up. Exhale, chair pose, Utkatasana. You can bring your hands to your heart. And here, when we twist, what you'll notice is where your knees are. So we'll take a very simple twist to start. We're just going to turn to the right. So if your knees are still parallel and your thighs can sort of spin toward one another, you're doing great. Your hips are squared up. Inhale, come center. Exhale, twist to the other side. I felt my right hip move forward there, so I'm going to shift it back. Come to center. Rise up and a forward fold. Half lift. Forward fold, rise back again. This time we're going to come back into chair, but we're going to take a deeper twist. So we're going to send the heart forward a little bit, check the hips, and then we're going to twist, maybe bringing an elbow or an arm outside the right leg. This is the place where the hips tend to come unsquared. I have to move my right ankle and bring my left hip back. Inhale through center, twist to the other side. Inhale through center, exhale, forward fold. Half lift and a forward fold. The left foot steps way to the back of the mat. We're going to take a warrior one. Warrior one, the stance is generally a little shorter than your crescent. And now we're going to rise up halfway. Feel where your hips are. If they're not squared up, you might move your front foot one way or the other, and then rise up with a bend in your front knee. I can still feel that my right hip is forward of my left. So I'm like this, I need to be like this. I'm gonna take a little more space in the front. Warrior one, nice strong back leg. Sweep bend in the front knee, arms overhead. Using all four corners of the feet. Hands to your heart, step forward. Arms sweep overhead, breathe out, forward fold. Ardha Uttanasana, halfway lift. And a forward fold. Right foot steps to the back of the mat. We're going to find our warrior one. So I'm going to work to square up my hips first, bringing my left foot out to the left. Pointing the right toes to the upper right corner. The bend in my left knee, hands to my hips to check them out. And then I'm going to rise up into my warrior one. I'm checking my hips. They seem to be in the right spot. I'll square it up. Arms overhead. Now it's easier now when we go into crescent. So spinning on the ball of the back foot and lengthening your stance. Your hips should pretty well be squared up. Then we're going to open up to a warrior two. Your hips now should be parallel to one another. You might need a longer stance. Here, the hardest part is keeping the shoulders over the hips. And we reverse it. Extend our front leg. Double check that your hips are squared up, your belly is in, and we'll find our way into Trikonasana. If your booty is hanging out way behind your shoulders, you're not squared up. You should feel like you're between two panes of glass. So a little bit more than the hips. So maybe it's a hip-focused alignment practice. We're going to rise back up. Bring the hands to the hips. Bring the front foot parallel to the front of the mat. Spin on your right heel, face the back of the mat. We come into our warrior two. Reverse. Straighten your front leg. Check. I can check because I have video that the shoulders and the hips are in the same plane. Arms straight out. Look over the middle of the right hand. Reach that hand forward, Trikonasana. Now the hardest thing is to move back into a crescent warrior. So I'm going to bring my hand down, shorten my stance a little bit, move my right foot out to the right, spin on the ball of the left foot, and come into crescent here. Hands to the hips. Step the left foot halfway up the mat. Square up your hips, so you might need to widen your stance. We're going to come into diamond pyramid pose. Parsvottanasana. So oftentimes the hip associated with the front leg is forward and the hip associated with the back leg is backward. So go ahead and shift. Use a lot of the heel of the back leg and a lot of the ball of the front leg, and then fold halfway down. Check your hips. If they don't feel right, adjust. I had to square mine up a little bit more, and then all the way down to prop or the ground. Step forward, left foot comes to meet the right, a halfway lift, a forward fold and right into chair pose, Utkatasana, Checking that your hips are nice and square. Hands to your heart. Lift the right foot off the mat and step it back halfway. Rise up. My feet need to move left and right in order to square up my hips for pyramid pose. Hands on your hip creases. Check the hips are squared up. Extra energy in the heel of the back foot and the ball of the front. Fold halfway down. Recheck your hips. Square up. Usually the right hip needs to move a little forward and the left hip a little backward, but it depends on the body. Fold all the way down if that feels comfortable. When you think about this and the squareness of the hips, move toward the long edge of your mat, spread your feet out a little bit more, toes in, heels out. You might imagine, I forgot where I was going with that. You might imagine that your hips are like the bottom corners of a box, or maybe the top corners of a box. And you're trying to keep them even. Arms come to the thighs, interlace your fingers, bring your heels in, your toes out, and drop your bottom, not all the way down, just in a high squat. And we're going to take some cats and cows here. We'll rise up, 5-pointed star. We'll take a power gesture, our mudra, so the fingers make a fist, but the thumbs remain out, almost like you're hitchhiking toward the sky. Hitchhike in space. We're going to come back into temple. Elbows bend, knees bend out. We're going to rise back into 5-pointed star. Come back into temple. I shorten my stance a little bit. If your booty is sticking out behind you, you're going to tuck it in. So this isn't necessarily about hips squared up, but the hips should be squared. This is about shoulders over the hips. Lift the right heel off the mat, sink lower. Stay where you are, but bring your heel down. Lift the left heel off the mat, sink lower. Stay where you are, bring the heel down. With both heels off the mat, it's a lot harder. Sink lower, pause. Bring the heels down, rise up, hands to your heart. Step forward to the front of your mat. Beautiful. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale, forward fold. Halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. Step back for your high plank. Reach the heart forward, low plank. I need to drop my knees for that because of my wrist. Your back bend. And into a downward dog through table or what have you. Now I can't do the hip openers from downward dog with one leg raised because of my left wrist. So I'm going to demonstrate from tabletop. Not quite as clean. You're welcome to go to tabletop or stay in your downward dog. The hips are square to start. And you're going to lift the right leg upward, square up your hips to start. And then as a demonstration that you can feel yourself, you're going to open up your hips purposefully. So the left hip will stack over the right. If we bend the right knee, gravity can help us open up our hip. Now our hips are purposely unsquared. Gather the belly in, straighten the leg out, stack, square up your hips again, draw your knee to your nose. Inhale, extend the leg, and bring the knee back down. Beautiful. Cats and cows. If you're kneeling, but if you're in downward dog, you might just bend the knees and then bring the heels back to the ground. As I said, I'm unable to do down dog for any period of time. giving my left wrist. So we're gonna start with the hips squared up and down dog, the belly strong, and we're gonna feel what it feels like to move from squared hips to open hips. So the left leg will float, hips are still squared up. Float it as high as you can, reach the heel behind you. Then stack the left hip over the right. Bend your left knee to use gravity to help the hips open up. In downward dog, you should now be looking underneath your right armpit. Square up your hips, lengthen your left leg. Bring your left knee to your elbow, hips should be squared up. Come back to your downward dog. Everyone drop into tabletop. You might drop slowly into plank first, and some more cats and cows. We're going to work into a couple of back bends. So we're going to come to seated on our heels. So it wasn't a lot of vinyasa in that, but there was movement. There was aerobic movement. And again, finding where the hips feel square. We did that in Warrior One, chair twist, Parsvottanasana, wide-legged forward fold. We did not do a wide-legged twist, but that's okay. Warrior Two and Trikonasana we also did. So all of that was meant to help you feel hips squared up. Our last standing posture was a three-legged open dog. So that was intended to demonstrate and experience the difference between your hips squared up and your hips opening up. Same thing when you're seated, but we're going to start with a back bend, in which case the hips are squared up. So we're going to work into half camels. Stand on your knees. Some people call it kneeling. I need to tuck my toes. I'm not quite as open in the heart space and the shoulder space, and especially the low back space. So we're going to start by bringing the heels of the hands to the low back. Right now the belly is drawn in. The hips are right over the knees. We'll push the flesh down with the hands. Send the hips forward a couple of inches. Extend the torso. Lift the heart and squeeze the shoulder blades together. You might even imagine there's this gorgeous thread of golden light coming from your heart and attaching itself to the sun, where you're sharing the sun's energy. So this is our prep. Scoop the belly in, lift the shoulders over the hips, untuck your toes, and bring your seat back down. If you like, a little helicopter arms, take them here. And we'll come to kneeling, tuck our toes, do the same thing, hands behind you, press the flesh down, hips forward. We lengthen the quads in this as well. And of course the hips are squared up. Lengthen the torso, squeeze those shoulder blades, you're falling in love. Heart lifts to the sky, maybe the head drops back. We can take the left hand, reach for the left heel. That might be enough. You really want to draw your tailbone forward and your belly in toward your spine to protect your low back. Hips should still be squared up. Right arm can float up to the sky. You might feel this more in your quads. You might feel it in the middle of your back. If it's in the low back, tuck your tailbone forward. Right hand to your heart. Squeeze the belly, rise back up, left hand to your right. And then we'll take it to the other side. Hands to your low back again. Push down, hips forward. Long, long, long. Shoulder blades in love, knitting together. Heart high, head back. Right hand to your heel. Square up those hips, left arm high. And you might feel this more in your left quad, like I do, because I'm really stretching to keep my hips squared up. Tailbone forward. Left hand to your heart. Belly in, shoulders over the hips, hands to your heart. Untuck your toes. come to kneeling. And a little helicopter work. And we'll move into our final back bend, which is Anahatasana, my favorite. And then we'll move down to some seated work that will demonstrate the different experience of doing some stretching with the hips squared and the hips unsquared. So right now, hips are squared up. Bottom stays just above the knees, and the hands walk forward until the forehead, chin, or chest touches the ground. And remember we were talking about hugs, or at least I was earlier? Actually, first of all, if your shoulders get a little angry here, you might bend your elbows outward and touch your thumbs or your index fingers. This is as if you're someone lying under a piece of glass facing you, and you want to hug them. But you can't really hug them because the arms can't go around the glass because they're under the glass, under the floor. Don't worry, there's plenty of air for them. So what you want to do is imagine how close your heart could get to them, so that the exchange of energy feels like a hug. So you might imagine your breath and the beautiful energy of autumn around you is not settling below your left shoulder blade and inside your left shoulder blade, but actually permeating it to create first this sort of hug of energy around your heart. Warmth, compassion, love, kindness. And then that starts to draw the heart down because gravity helps it do so. Begin to tuck your tailbone, walk your hands back, rise up. We'll cross our ankles and come to a seated posture. Now, this is an interesting place or posture, twisting on the floor relative to where the hips are, because it's super easy to lift one sitting bone off the floor when you're twisting. So if you take your right heel and place it underneath your left thigh, as close to your glutes as possible, we're going to try a twist just with the left foot placed in front of the right ankle. We're going to sit up nice and tall, use our left hand to guide us, and maybe our right elbow or arm comes outside that left knee. But if your right knee is lifting up and your right sitting bone is lifting off the mat, don't bring the arm over, and press your sitting bone to the earth. Press your outside of your knee to the earth, and press the ball of your left foot to the earth. Breathe in tall. Exhale, twist. And in. And twist. And in. And twist. Inhale, front and center. Now, a twist that I really enjoy, but my body isn't always ready for it, is to actually take that front ankle and place it outside the right thigh. I don't know if you can see that, but I immediately lifted my left glute off the mat. So I'm going to see if I can get it back on. Closer your heel is to the bottom, the easier it is. But if this is making you all twisty, and right now my left glute is pretty much off the mat, we don't do it that way, because we want to keep the hips squared up. Now, if I bring my foot back in front, I've got to shift a little bit. So check that out for a minute on your own and see how it works. If it works, take 3 beautiful cleansing breaths. If it doesn't, come back to your other twist for 3 breaths. And you also don't want the bent knee to be coming over either. So we're going to try it on the other side. Let's do it the other way, the harder way. I'll call it the harder way first. So left heel toward your glutes, right ankle crosses over. Immediately my bottom came away from the mat. So this is not a twist today that I can do. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. So if you can, if your foot reaches the ground, the front foot, and your right glutes are on the ground, take that twist, breathe for 6 breaths. Otherwise, take it with the right foot down, right in front of the left ankle, square up your hips, sit up tall, and twist. Lower your right shoulder. Inhale, front and center. A quick look at time. I think we're going to go ahead and take a seated figure 4. So both feet are on the ground. There's space between the heels and the sitting bones. Both sitting bones are on the ground. Heart is lifted. Lift your left knee. Cross your left ankle above your right knee. Some people are going to want to lean back. Maybe that's okay if the shoulders draw down and your shoulder blades draw in. If you can, though, you would really like a nice, strong, active belly with your heart forward, moving toward your shin. And the big toe mound of the right foot, the front foot, on the ground. If you're stretchy enough and you like to go into a hamstring stretch or a rock the baby, feel free. I don't have that this morning, but up to you. Now we're going to straighten the front leg. It's coming right out of your hip bone, straight out, and place the sole of the left foot inside either the right calf or the right thigh. Square up your hips. It's a different thing to do this than this, or to do this than this. In janu sursasana, the head of the knee pose, as in the head of the knee, the bent knee is moving downward. You want your hips as squared up as possible so you're not twerking. You also imagine that your thighs are spinning outward in this posture. And you don't have to reach your toes. You really want a nice long spine. Rise up. Let's extend the leg out to the right a little bit and bring the heel closer to the center of the body. Now you're turning and folding, a very different thing. You might feel way more of a stretch on the hip on the left. So 2 different postures. We'll rise back up, face the center, and take our seated figure 4 on the other side. Left foot down, right ankle crosses. Activate both feet. Sit up nice and tall, heart toward the shin or the calf, the shin and calf toward the heart. Rocking the baby if you got it. Big toe mound of the left foot, right on the ground. If you can rock the baby, it feels really good, but don't overdo it. We don't want any popping hamstrings. Sit up nice and tall. Release the baby. Extend your left leg straight out of your hip. Janu sursasana. Head of the knee toward the ground. Sit up super tall and come forward, maybe with a bent left leg. And we'll rise up and we'll test out that extended hip approach where we have to turn, very different posture, and then fold. So here your left hip needs to be a little behind your right hip, very purposefully. Heart forward, long spine. Rise back up. We're going to even the hips out once more by bringing the soles of the feet together for Baddha Konasana. You're welcome to take a back bend, open your feet like a book and remain tall, or take a fold. Maybe bring a little smile to your face now that you've had an exploration of squaring up and unsquaring. Why it's important to square up in the postures where it's meant to be, like twists and warrior one, Parsvottanasana, chair, downward dog, warrior two, Trikonasana, and the floor postures. Rise back up. I'm going to find our way all the way down to the mat. I'm going to go sideways. You're welcome to keep your knees bent. Whatever you do, it's one last posture. I'm going to take a happy baby. You might take a twist. If you bring your knees into your chest or you move into virtual legs up the wall, all of those are great for your last posture. And again, if you take something asymmetrical, be sure to move to the other side. And eventually we'll all meet in our version of Shavasana. I'm going to take Supta Baddha Konasana. Keep opening up my hips, but you might take the more traditional kind. Shoulder blades move toward the hips on each side. We take a big, big breath in. Let everything go. Nothing any longer efforted. Let me take a few minutes of breath. Let everything integrate to yoke together, to have integrity, unifiedness, wholeness, oneness. And open up ourselves to relaxation and anything that might come for the rest of the day. Let the breath deepen once again. Full body stretch, toes reach forward, arms and fingers reach behind or on top of the head, depending on how you look at it. And then we gently gather the knees in, roll to one side, and press ourselves gently to a seat. Eyes in a meditative state or closed, palms together at your heart. Come back to your intention for this practice. Now let's share that outward with the sound of Om, or maybe a silent Om, along with the merits that you developed over the course of this specific practice. We'll breathe all the air out of the lungs to start and fill up for Om. Om. Thumb knuckles connect right at the center of your forehead. May you share the love and compassion and warmth and kindness of hugs today. Namaste. With heartfelt thanks for each and every one of you individually and as a yogic community, even though you're invisible to me. I can feel your energy. I hope to see you again soon. And don't forget to stop by either for yoga here in the studio or the next 2 Tuesdays, the 29th of October and whatever that is in November at Inklings. Bring your little ones or come by and do some glass work with us, glass fusing, paperweights, the like. And stay tuned because our ornament making is coming up for the end of the year. Thank you.